I walked into the school library during the PTA meeting expecting the usual: stale cookies, lukewarm coffee, and a dozen parents arguing about bake sale prices. Instead, I caught sight of my half-brother Ethan, standing at the front like he owned the place. The words he was speaking didn't fully register at first. And I'm proud to say I'll personally cover Lily's senior year tuition, giving her the future she deserves. For a split second, my brain failed to process that Lily was my daughter. When the ripple of murmurs spread around the room and every pair of eyes turned toward me, heat shot from my chest to my ears. I wanted to shout right then, to say that he had nothing to do with that tuition money, that for 10 years I'd lived on a shoestring budget, skipping vacations, fixing appliances with duct tape instead of buying new ones, all so that fund would be ready in time. That part of it was a small trust my late mother set up for Lily because she wanted to be part of her education. But my voice didn't work. Ethan was beaming, soaking up applause, and that stirred-up admiration only wealthy benefactors get. The PTA president clapped him on the shoulder, saying, "This is what generosity looks like, folks." I hated how perfect the picture looked. Ethan in his tailored jacket, the easy smile that made tension seem impossible, and me, frozen halfway between 2 rows of plastic chairs, holding a journal in one hand and a bottle of water in the other, like some clueless bystander at my own event. If you've never felt that sudden loss of narrative, like your own family story has been rewritten in 30 seconds flat, you can't imagine the disorientation. Ethan wasn't just being generous. He was branding himself as Lily's rescuer. And somehow, as everyone kept glancing at me, I became the unspoken before picture in his success story. I stayed still through the rest of the agenda, every word muffled in my ears, because I was already calculating who had heard this, what version would spread by tomorrow, and what Lily herself believed. By the time the meeting broke up and parents swarmed Ethan with congratulations, I knew one thing: I couldn't let this become the truth everyone remembered. But there was one question pounding in my skull as I left the room. How long had Ethan been preparing for this? Shall I write the next chapter? Walking to my car after the meeting, my hands were trembling around my keys. The hallway outside the library had been full of ringing laughter, people chatting about Ethan's huge heart, and every time they mentioned Lily's name, I felt a twist in my stomach. I didn't even remember the drive home, just that my grip on the steering wheel was aching by the time I pulled into the driveway. The thing is, Ethan and I aren't exactly strangers. We share a father, but our childhoods were completely different. He lived mostly with his mother, in the city, going to private schools and growing up with summer camps and ski trips. I grew up under a leaking roof in our father's house, and when Dad passed away, the little he left was split. Ethan got assets and cash tied up in his mother's investments. I got our memories and, importantly, the trust my mom had put aside for Lily before she passed. That college fund has been my anchor for years. There were nights I picked up extra shifts in the ER, eating crackers for dinner, telling myself it was worth it to see Lily graduate debt-free. She's always known the plan, that I and I alone had made it possible for her to chase the degree she wanted. So why now was Ethan inserting himself into the picture like some last-minute savior? Part of me thought maybe it was just impulse, a grand gesture to look good in front of the PTA crowd. But as I replayed the smirk on his face, the way he seemed perfectly prepared, I realized something. This had been rehearsed. He'd been showing up at Lily's school a lot more lately under the guise of helping with events. Sometimes he'd text me after making plans with her directly, like it was no big deal. I'd laughed it off, thinking he was just trying to be a better uncle. Now, an ugly thought took root. What if he'd been laying the groundwork for weeks, months, spinning a version of events to others that I wasn't aware of? When Lily came home that evening, She was quiet. She didn't mention the meeting. I waited for her to bring it up, but when I finally did, asking if Ethan had said anything to her beforehand, she shrugged. "He just wants to help, Mom," she said softly. Then she went upstairs before I could ask anything else. Her reaction told me more than she knew. This wasn't going to be easy to untangle. Not without making me look like the bitter, overprotective sister who couldn't stand anyone else getting credit. But I couldn't just let this slide. I needed to find out exactly when and how Ethan had started positioning himself as the hero in Lily's life. And why. Shall I write the next chapter? Looking back over the past few months, I started to see the tiny cracks that had been there all along. The kinds of things you ignore because they seemed too petty to call out at the time. There was the day Lily showed me her English essay draft, only for me to notice Ethan's name in the last edited by tag. Turns out he'd helped her with it, but sent his revised version straight to the guidance counselor without telling me. He'd written whole paragraphs in his voice, not hers. I remember making a light joke about him being her ghostwriter, but he just smirked and said, "Well, I do know what wins awards." And then there were the school event invitations. I'd started missing the occasional PTA prep meeting because the emails never came. When I asked the organizer, she said, "Oh, I thought you were busy. Ethan told me he'd pass things along." They were probably just mistaken, except it kept happening, over and over, shifting me a little further out of the loop each time. At Lily's theater performance tech rehearsal, Ethan somehow ended up backstage with a headset, calling cues. He wasn't even on the committee for that, but there he was, shaking hands with the principal afterward like they'd known each other for years. Meanwhile, my volunteer badge still had my name spelled wrong after 3 correction requests. Individually, these moments seemed harmless enough, but string them together, and there was a pattern. Ethan inserting himself into situations where I was supposed to be the parent front and center. He was taking up space that wasn't his, building invisible credit in front of Lily's school, teachers, and administrators. The realization made my skin crawl. This wasn't an accident. He was curating a version of himself, the engaged, responsible, generous half-brother who had swooped in to support my daughter. And the cruelest part was, he was doing it so smoothly that even I had half believed his involvement was harmless until now. But what was he building toward? Covering tuition out of nowhere was too big a move to be spontaneous. If I'd missed weeks of subtle pushes, what else had I failed to see? And how far would he take it? I decided the next time he made one of these moves, I wouldn't let it pass. But I had no idea the next time would come sooner, or publicly, and it would push me from wary suspicion into open anger. Shall I write the next chapter? 2 days later, the chance, or rather the ambush, came. It was honors night at Lily's high school, one of those evenings where the gym smells faintly of new paint and paper programs, folding chairs creak under proud parents, and the seniors walk across the stage in shiny shoes they'll never wear again. I sat halfway up the bleachers with my phone ready to film her award. When Lily's name was called, she beamed at me before heading on stage. I was so focused on recording her walk that I didn't notice Ethan until he appeared from the wings. He wasn't supposed to be up there, and he wasn't empty-handed. He had a thick white envelope, the oversized kind you associate with scholarships or prize money. He shook the principal's hand, then turned to Lily with that photogenic smile. The principal took the microphone and announced, "And here's a very special gift from her uncle, Mr. Ethan Reynolds, who so generously ensured her college future is secure." Applause, whistles, teachers nodding approvingly. My hands were locked, phone still filming, though my stomach had dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I could see Lily's cheeks flush pink, unsure where to look. The envelope looked heavy in her hands, like it contained the world. Ethan patted her shoulder, as if sealing a deal in front of a crowd of witnesses. Parents around me started whispering, "That's her uncle? How nice. What a role model." I wanted to shout that it wasn't true, that he hadn't insured anything she didn't already have. But the spell was cast. In that moment, the public narrative he wanted was complete. When Lily returned to her seat, she kept the envelope in her lap, fingers resting on it like something precious. She didn't meet my eyes, and I knew right then that if I confronted Ethan here, I'd be the one to ruin her night in front of everyone. He'd calculated that, I was sure of it. So I clapped when everyone else clapped, my smile frozen, already working through my next move. If he could rewrite the facts in front of the whole school, what was he angling for behind the scenes? The answer, I suspected, would be much worse than just stealing credit. And when I tried to take a quiet step toward fixing it the very next day, I learned just how far Ethan had already gone to cement himself in Lily's future. Shall I write the next chapter? The very next morning, I marched into the school office, determined to set the record straight. I asked to see the guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, a calm, meticulous woman who, up until now, had always treated me with warmth and respect. She ushered me into her office, its shelves crammed with binders and framed photos of graduating seniors. I told her directly. I wanted to clarify something about Lily's college funding. Ethan's speech at the meeting and honors night. It gave the wrong impression. The fund has been in place for years, and it's under my management. He hasn't provided it. Mrs. Patterson hesitated. I understand, but the documentation on file lists Ethan Reynolds as the guardian of the college fund. I stared at her, the words stalling in midair for me. I'm sorry. List him as what? She swiveled in her chair, pulling up a folder from the cabinet. It wasn't a photocopy of the original bank paperwork we'd submitted 2 years ago. This was new. It had my daughter's name, the account number, and Ethan's name in the box for guardian manager. My own space was blank. Where did you get this version? I tried to keep my voice from shaking. It was emailed to me a few weeks ago, she said, scanning her computer. Ethan CC'd the principal. He said there had been an update for logistical ease since he was helping facilitate some scholarship opportunities. My hands prickled cold. A few weeks ago. So, before the PTA announcement, before honors night, he'd already planted himself in the official records, without a court order, without my consent. I pulled out my own copies from my bag, the originals with my name as guardian. Mrs. Patterson compared them, her brow knitting. This is highly unusual, she murmured. But given that the school had newer paperwork on file, we treated it as the current version. Which meant, on paper, here in the school's eyes, I'd already been erased from my own daughter's college plans. My pulse was thundering. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a takeover, slickly executed under the guise of help. Mrs. Patterson offered to look into it, but I knew that would be slow. The truth hit me. Ethan wasn't just controlling the narrative in conversations. He was altering the facts in places that mattered. That night, desperate for answers, I dug through my email accounts for anything from him or the school about the change. And what I found in my inbox made my breath catch. Not just because it was incriminating, but because it had never been meant for me to see. Shall I write the next chapter? It was nearly midnight when I found it, buried in my spam folder of all places. The subject line read, PTA Gala Planning, Strategic Alignment. It was an email thread, originally from Ethan's work account, accidentally forwarded to my old secondary email that I barely check. The chain began harmlessly enough, talking about tickets for the PTA Gala. But halfway down, my eyes locked on a paragraph that made my stomach knot. We'll feature Lily in the Success Stories segment. I'll frame it as her overcoming obstacles with my guidance and support, which plays well with both donors and local media. Securing her as the face of the youth initiative will highlight my personal commitment to education and give the committee a relatable hook. He wasn't even subtle about it. He was using Lily as a prop for his image, almost like an accessory to an outfit. And worse, he framed it as if he had carried her through hardship, as if my years of sacrifices didn't exist. Then came another line that chilled me. Given that I'm listed as guardian of her fund, the narrative holds credibility and is easy to verify. So that was the point. All those so-called logistical changes to the paperwork weren't for her benefit at all. They were for his credibility, a legal-looking paper trail he could wave in front of donors and journalists. Scrolling further down, I saw the reply from one of his political committee members. "This is perfect. A feel-good story that softens your profile heading into campaign season. Donors love a personal connection, especially with kids who made it thanks to you. Keep the mom either gracious or in the background." Keep the mom in the background. That was me. I sat back from the screen, trembling with a mix of rage and an icy kind of clarity. This was never about family generosity. It was about optics, power, and positioning me as either invisible or indebted to him. From this moment onward, I knew waiting wasn't an option. His campaign event was weeks away, but the school's finance subcommittee, the one reviewing the gala lineup, was meeting on Tuesday, and the thought crystallized in my head. If I showed up with the right evidence, I could detonate his little PR fantasy in front of the people he most wanted to impress. The risk: Lily might feel caught in the crossfire. But I also knew, if I let him cement this narrative any further, she might never know the truth at all. Shall I write the next chapter? By Tuesday morning, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was sharp, clear, and done being erased. The finance subcommittee met in the school's secondary conference room, a narrow space with low ceilings, and one wall painted in that oppressive school district beige. 8 people sat around the table. The principal, Mrs. Patterson, 2 PTA board members, a couple of teachers, and, of course, Ethan, sitting at the head in a charcoal suit, coffee cup in hand, like he was presiding over a board meeting. He gave me a polished, almost bored smile. "Nice to see you joining us, sis. Did you want to share something?" His tone was layered, that fake affectionate jab that sounds harmless to others but is meant to corner you. "Yes," I said, sliding a small, well-organized folder onto the table. "I want to clarify a factual error about my daughter's college fund, and about who's actually been responsible for it." His smile twitched just enough to betray him. I pulled out the originals, the trust documents from my mother's estate, bank statements showing my consistent deposits over the years, and the official letter naming me, solely, as the guardian of the account. Next to them, I placed the updated version Mrs. Patterson had on file, the one Ethan had sent in with his name in my spot. Then I lifted my tablet, screen glowing with the forwarded email chain. But I didn't read it. I let them read it themselves. The principal frowned. One PTA board member actually closed her eyes and exhaled sharply when she reached the line about keeping the mom gracious or in the background. That was the moment the equilibrium in the room shifted. Ethan tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, this is being taken out of context. Everyone in politics frames stories to connect with the community." "This isn't about politics," I cut in. "This is about you falsifying records to sell a version of my life that makes me a side character, and about using my daughter as a marketing tool without my consent." I said it without raising my voice, but the stillness it created was its own kind of volume. Then, from the corner of the room, Lily's voice. "You told me you were just helping, Uncle Ethan." She was standing by the door, in her school hoodie, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes darting between both of us. The fact she was hearing all this here, like this, made my heart twist. But it also meant the performance was over. No more whispering through intermediaries. And in that heavy silence, I knew the next seconds would determine which story Lily decided to believe. "Shall I write the next chapter?" Ethan turned toward Lily like an actor switching scenes, his tone sliding instantly into gentle, almost wounded. "Lils, I was just trying to make sure you had every opportunity. Your mom, she works so hard, but sometimes she doesn't see the big picture." The patronizing edge in those last words nearly made me lunge across the table. "Don't," I warned, my voice low but cutting. "Don't stand here and rewrite my choices in front of my daughter like they're limitations. I am the big picture. Every dime in that fund is there because I put it there." Something shifted in Lily's face. A flicker, quick but noticeable, as though a shadow had been pulled off a corner of her mind. She looked down at the documents on the table, her eyes scanning between my name on the originals and his on the forged update. Ethan reached for charm again, turning back to the group. "Listen, this is clearly a misunderstanding. I can have my assistant forward the correct version of the fund paperwork. No harm done." But Mrs. Patterson interrupted, her voice firm. "Mr. Reynolds, you understand that what you submitted to the school is considered an official record. Submitting altered records without consent, especially concerning a minor's financial assets, is not a misunderstanding. It's misconduct." That landed like a gavel strike. Ethan's smile froze, then fell away entirely. The principal cleared his throat. "Given these discrepancies, the school can't proceed with using you in any official gala presentations or graduation segments until this is resolved, and the rightful guardian remains in place." It was the first visible crack in Ethan's armor. He leaned back slowly, jaw tight. "If that's how you want to play it," he said, low enough for only me to hear. Lily's voice, however, was clear enough for the whole room. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I would have still liked you without all this." It sounded simple, but from her, it was an indictment. Ethan flinched before pushing away from the table, muttering something about real work to do, and walking out without another glance. The door shutting behind him felt like a shift in air pressure. But I knew walking out of this room didn't mean the fight was entirely over, because outside, in the real world, Ethan still had his committee, his donors, and his polished story. What fell apart here today? He could try to rebuild it there. The question was, would Lily stand with me publicly now? Or would she get caught in his web again once emotions cooled? The answer would come faster than I expected. Shall I write the next chapter? The moment we stepped out into the hallway, the murmur of the meeting still buzzing behind the closed door, Lily slowed her pace. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she stared at her sneakers, like she was rehearsing words she wasn't sure she could say. "I didn't know, Mom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When Uncle Ethan talked about the fund, he made it seem like you'd given him control for convenience. He said you were too busy to deal with the details and that he could help with the complicated stuff." I breathed through the ache in my chest. "Lily, complicated stuff is the part I stayed up nights learning to handle myself, because your grandmother trusted me to take care of you. Every decision I've made about that money was so you would never feel like a burden or a project for someone else's story." She lifted her head, eyes glassy but determined. "I guess I didn't want to believe he'd lie. I liked the idea of having, someone else looking out for me besides you. It felt like a team." Her voice cracked on the last word. We walked in silence for a few moments, the echo of our steps loud against the linoleum. Then she said, "When I saw those emails about keeping you in the background, that's when it hit me. I don't want to be anyone's prop." Her words struck deep, not just because they meant she was seeing the manipulation for what it was, but because they echoed exactly the fear that had been sitting in my chest since that first PTA meeting, that his version of her life would become more real than the truth. That night, Lily posted a short, calm statement in the PTA Facebook group. Not dramatic, not accusing, just factual. My college fund has always been entirely managed by my mom. Any appearances to the contrary were based on incorrect information. She's my sole guardian for all financial and educational matters. It was more powerful than anything I could have sent myself, and she signed it simply, Lily. Within 24 hours, word got back to me that Ethan had been advised by his campaign contacts to skip the gala and let the matter die down. His image was starting to fray, and with it, the perfect narrative he'd spent months crafting. But I wasn't interested in celebrating his loss. I was focused on what came next, making sure there would never be room for anyone else to slide into my role again, no matter how charming their smile or how noble their words. Shall I write the final chapter? 3 weeks later, the gala came and went without any trace of Ethan. The Success Stories segment ran with a group of students. No solo spotlight, no political pitch hidden in a personal tale. Lily and I sat together at a table near the back, laughing at the awkward speeches, eating too many mini quiches. For the first time in months, I felt like the air around us was ours again. But it wasn't just Ethan being absent that made it different. It was Lily. Something in her had shifted since that meeting. She started looping me in first on school plans and senior deadlines, showing me drafts for club announcements, even asking if we could go visit a few campuses together, just us. The distance that had been creeping in between us was shrinking, replaced by this quiet, steady reconnection I hadn't dared hope for so soon. One evening, while sorting through papers at the dining table, we came across the original trust document again. Lily picked it up, her fingers tracing the embossed seal. I see now why Grandma made this for me, and why she trusted you with it, she said. There was no bitterness in her voice anymore, just understanding. I realized then that Ethan's betrayal, as ugly as it was, had given us a strange kind of gift. The reminder that trust isn't about grand gestures or public applause. It's about consistency, the quiet work no one applauds, the kind that holds things together when no one's watching. As for Ethan, we didn't cut him out completely. Lily decided she still wanted some contact. Birthdays, the occasional family event, but strictly on our terms. No more managing details without my consent. No more stepping into her milestones as though they were props in his portfolio. I didn't need him to like these boundaries. I just needed to hold them firm, because I finally understood the truth I should have seen sooner. Generosity that comes with strings isn't generosity at all. It's leverage. And in my family, that leverage stops here.